Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to our chat about navigating our emotions and what the hell to do with them. This is Dr. Tamsin Astor joining us. Hi, Tamsin.
Hey, Krystal, I'm super excited that we're having this conversation.
Same, and thank you to all of you that were waiting patiently for our Facebook Live. This is our backup plan, and we are running with it. So we're going to dive
That's right.
right in. Tamsin, why don't you give everybody a bit of background of like what you're bringing to this conversation around navigating emotions specifically?
Sure. So I'm the chief habit scientist. I help people exponentially improve their productivity by teaching them habit shifts. So I really help you think about your habits, all of your habits, your professional habits, your personal habits, your emotional habits, and how you can activate them and harness them and use your brain's goal achieving natural function to automate the habits that are healthy and to reflect on the habits that are no longer serving you, because habits are often talked about in the negative, and I want to make a positive swing on them.
Oh, I love it. And especially, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily pair, at least, okay, let me speak for me. I wouldn't necessarily pair habits with navigating emotions, but that's what I've seen you bring to this conversation. And that's why I wanted to team up, for this specific conversation, because there are ways to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you and I over the last, how long we've been friends now? 8 months, 9 months, I've been having this conversation on and off since we met last summer. Yeah.
Yeah. This is our jam. This is what we
Yeah.
love to geek out about. Okay. And then from my perspective, those in my community are familiar with me, but those who are visiting from Tamsin's community, first of all, welcome. And I am an ease mentor. So I help go-getter women to slow the fuck down. We're going to swear here. That's just happening.
That's what we do.
It's just our flow. And I help them figure out self-care that's actually sustainable for them, not what Cosmo magazine says, or not what the articles online say, the cute little memes. We're talking about actual nourishment on an emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental level, and figuring out what that actually is for you. It's entirely unique. And so for this conversation specifically, I'm bringing the perspective of understanding energetics around emotions and understanding the self-care around emotions. How do we even prioritize emotional care? It usually gets so backburnered that it manifests in the body later in this huge way. And there's so much to unpack. And given our current landscape right now, we have this, I call it like a suspension in time, or a suspension in the flow of things, where there's an opening to really be with what's coming up emotionally. And so our goal today is it's actually a couple things. One, it's to figure out how to tether and ground yourself when you're about to go in on your emotions. Two, to just accept, and we're going to talk more about how to actually do that in a practical way. We're not like all woosah here on the top of a mountain. Like, we know there's real life and kids and we get it. And if we can figure it out, if Tamsin and I can figure it out, so can you. And we're here to hold your hand through that process. And then we're also going to look into what are your options? Most people don't even realize you have options for emotional navigation. What does that even mean? We're going to talk about that. And then we're also going to leave you with some resources, just like seed plants, like planting seeds of what else is possible to get yourself some support in this area.
Right. And I think that one of the things that, as you're talking, that this reminds me of, and where we overlap, and I think where the conversation between you and I is so powerful, is that we both have this very strong foundation that it is unique, right? That everybody can create their own unique way of navigating this, and that, having this idea that one size fits all is completely wrong. And so, my training is in Ayurveda and mindset coaching. So we both have these unique, different trainings, but give this idea that there isn't a one size fits all, and that is a key takeaway here.
And to set the expectation that you're not going to have it all figured out by the end of this one combo.
We may be brilliant, but you have to do the work, guys.
We may be awesome, but but it's such an organic, messy, journey into your own inner world. But if you walk away from this conversation feeling deeper permission that you can, and with a couple different ideas, cognitive ideas of how to like just put form around emotions, sometimes those waves come up and you're just like, zap, I'm done, go numb out, just avoid. But our intention is to give you tools to cozy up to those emotions and like just get curious. And if that is your win for this conversation, just that shift, like that's huge. Happy dance. Okay, awesome. So tethering and grounding yourself. Tamsin, from your perspective, why are we starting here?
So I think because one of the things that first happens for many people is that they are aware of their emotions either through, acting in a way that feels not right, or somebody perhaps reflecting back to you, or a massive shift in your productivity. And one of the things that we're seeing right now is this massive shift in productivity because people are trying to figure out their normal lives, but from a completely different worldview, i.e. from home, worrying about the people they love, having to navigate children's and homeschooling, and, not wondering, do I support the local grocery store so that he doesn't go out of business, or should I avoid going to the grocery store and eat out of my freezer, right? So we're in this state of massive shift. And if we can't start by dropping in and going, like, what's going on, then we can't get anywhere. And I think, from the Ayurvedic perspective, emotions are energy, right? So we have these different sheaths in the yogic Ayurvedic framework. We have a physical body, the Annamaya kosha, which is the grounded physical body, right? Then we have the energy body, the Pranamaya kosha. We have the Manomaya kosha, the mental body. And we have the Pranamaya kosha, which is the energetic body. And if we don't stop, get still, and acknowledge, right? I'm feeling really upset. I'm feeling really angry. And maybe you can't even articulate the words. It's going to be hard to then do the work, right? And get to the place you want to be and support the people that you want to. And in Ayurveda, we use a number of different tools. So one of them is food. What you eat can massively affect how grounded you are. And we have a tendency, so in that state of flutter and anxiety, that's a vata disturbance, that's air space energy that's all over the place. And so we are often drawn to what is familiar in that state, which are things like crackers, dry, astringent things, because we're just like, I just want but actually that just elevates it and makes it worse. And what we want is things that pacify, things that are heavy, that are oily, that are soothing, that are wet, that are nourishing, that are going to have that earth water energy to bring you down, right? Another really key way that you can navigate it in Ayurveda is your body. So your physical touch, taking the time to physically massage your body and acknowledge its presence and just be like, hey, I'm here. Mind, come back into my body. And let me just, acknowledge my physical presence, because when we're in a state of stress, our mind, our mental body often wanders off, right? Nothing to do with it.
It's not again.
It's not here, right? And, taking a chance to feel my body and get warm too, so like a warm bath, a hot tub, a shower, under a blanket, weighted blankets, right? We've been using those for years in yoga and in Shavasana, and now suddenly everyone's buying weighted blankets. And I'm like, yeah, pacify the vata, because the vata is crazy, people. So those are some, Ayurvedic ways. The other is meditation. Again, like, what's going on with your mind? Can you bring it back in?
Mm-hmm. So even your body language as you're talking about that, it was like a lot of this and a lot of this.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Back to the center, bringing down into the earth.
Right. You're containing yourself, right? Because anxiety is basically massively scattered energy. And so what we're trying to do is create a ritual and a routine and a frame around it. And that helps draw you in. It helps connect you. Like one of my yoga teachers is like, get yourself together, and it's just like, where am I? Like, if something that, parents will say to their children, like, get yourself together, and it's like, where are myselves?
How true. And it shows up in our language. I'm always intrigued by that, right? It shows up in our actual language, these colloquialisms. It's like, oh yeah, I don't know where I am.
Yeah.
Collect yourself. Like literally collect yourself, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's so powerful. And, you know, from my perspective, when it comes to grounding, I was just doing a Facebook Live the other day where just the simplest grounding is just feeling your feet on the floor. You can do that eyes open. You can do that instant, just like putting your concentration, your consciousness on your feet in contact with the earth or whatever surface. And just that alone, it draws the energy down. It like spreads the energy out, because usually with the anxiety and the frenetic, like it's all up here and it's out here, and that's what we're sending out into the world. And if we're sending that out into the world, we end up drawing that in, and it's just like too much. So grounding, it's literally just like moving the energy down to the ground in the most practical sense. And what this also does for your body, it gives your body a cue of safety.
Yes. Right. Which I think is so key, and we forget in these times.
We do, because there's so much yanking, pulling. A friend of mine in the Netherlands, we like talk on Instagram. We were just talking about how like there's so much encroaching in on our space all the time, just all the time. And especially right now, there's fear, anxiety, death, scare, you know, money, worry. Bleh. It's like all these external impositions on our energy. And so if we don't take a moment, that breath just cut through all that noise.
Yeah. Right.
It cuts right through it. And so just breathing and moving the energy down through your feet, it brings you back home. Because if we're talking about navigating emotions, how the hell are you supposed to know what's yours and what is the world?
Yes. And that boundary, I think, is really interesting. I used to teach yoga to children, teenagers, and children who were in underserved communities and who were traumatized or were on the autism spectrum. And I used to do an activity, which you're just reminding of standing there. And I'd say, go and say, can I touch you? And I'd push them on the shoulder and they'd wobble. And then I'd say, exhale down through your feet. And then I'd do it again. And they were static. Wow. You know, and I would just show them exactly what you've just been describing. That when you ground, when you breathe through your feet, you come into an energetic space of holding your own and being there, so that you can then do the next thing you need to do. Right?
Right. Because how you don't even know what it is. You haven't taken inventory. You don't even know. You're not in tune or in touch.
Right. Exactly.
And the last piece on this is just like, our bodies are energetic. And so we are vulnerable to the energy, to our environment. And I remember when I was doing gut clearing and I was like clearing out the like candida and like bad bacteria. And I'm like, honey, you are no longer allowed to live rent-free in my body.
Right.
Okay. And tricking me into eating more sugar. This is not me. This is not the authentic me. So in the same way, if you do not take that stand for yourself, you become a wave crashing on the shores of whatever the news is saying. You literally just like hand over your body to whoever wants to control it. And you're just like flopping around. And then all of a sudden anxiety is through the roof.
Right, exactly. And so navigating that, you know, I had a friend who talked about the energy like a tennis racket. And if the tennis racket the strings are in alignment, the energy will move in, the energy will move out, and it's a coherent back and forth. Whereas if there's a break in it, it lets too much of the energy out and too much of the energy in. And so, you know, one of our jobs is to figure out what is a healthy energetic boundary, so that we can be in a space of acknowledging what is our energy and what is other people's energy. And that point, I think right now in the current state, is so key to acknowledge.
So if you want to pair your grounding, feeling your feet, imagine roots growing out of your feet, breathing, pouring all that energy down through the roots. And then after you do that, ask, is this mine? And from that quietness, that centeredness, the truth will just bubble up. You'll hear like, yeah, it's ours. Like, no, it's not. And then if it's not, just let it fall right off you down into the earth. And then if it is, this is where we go next.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And what do we do next? I mean, that's the thing, right? So we have to start. I mean, I think what's interesting that we're both pointing out is that you have to be willing to stop. If you don't stop and come into a place of stillness, then it's almost impossible to make this happen. Yeah.
And what happens when we slow down? When we've been running really fast?
We freak out.
All our shit comes up that we haven't been able to be with.
Yep. Right. Yeah.
But that's what these tools are for.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because this is happening all, I mean, it's one thing to slow down on your own while the rest of the world, I mean, I've done that for the last 10 years. I took a strong, hard right into my own world and then was willing to do, but like, it is no joke. It takes work. But for that choice to happen while the rest of the collective also has all their stuff coming up, it's a lot, you know, and that's why we wanted to get ahead of the emotional tidal wave that's about to surface with everybody slowing down, especially Americans slowing down.
Right.
We can know what to do with all of that.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what's really interesting here is watching the different people's reactions to that. And I think that's something that attracted you and I to each other when we first met, is that we both were clear that we had this different kind of energy and that we'd done a certain amount of work. And there was like, we just saw each other. Like I was coming off stage and you walked towards me and we were like, hey, you, let's make this thing happen.
That's another benefit of grounding. Like somebody's actually home. You can feel their truest essence.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Exactly. Because they've learned to recognize themselves and release the others. Right. Yeah.
So powerful.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, when you're getting quiet, when you're grounded, and now you know that what's bubbling up inside of you is actually yours, then emerges an opportunity. And the opportunity, no matter how uncomfortable, is to accept that this is what's here.
Yeah.
This is what's here for you.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
Speaking from experience. But also in that willingness to slow the F down, there's this literal treasure trove inside of you that if you're willing to ride that wave, let it peak, let it wash through you and come back down on the other side.
Yeah.
My love, there are so many gifts and so many insights and so many divine messages and downloads for you. There's so much to know about yourself.
Right. That, I think that's the key. And I think this is such a vital thing for what's going on right now. And I mean, I love the way Glennon Doyle talks about it, right? The knowing that if you are willing to slow down and look, you do know. And, you know, in the Ayurvedic model, we have an intuitive sheath, but we are so often taught to ignore it. Particularly, you know, we get to a certain age as a female and we're taught we're supposed to look a particular way, we're supposed to behave a particular way, we're not supposed to raise our voices, we're not supposed to do that, we're supposed to do what I call, and I say with my clients, like the shoulds, you know, the oughts, and we masturbate and we get stuck in these cycles rather than going like, what does that really feel like for me? Right? What's my second belly, my second brain, my belly, my gut telling me? What's that deeper knowing? What's my heart telling me? Right?
Yeah. When we were getting ready for this talk, I wrote in the copy of like, what if like becoming emotionally healthy and balanced is like the new cool thing to do? Like, I mean, you and I were in the early wave of the spiritual awakening, one of them, right? And so we've been preparing for this moment in time for 10 plus years, you know, even longer.
Right.
So, but then I'm like, what if in another couple, like maybe even 6 months, that the way time is moving, or like a couple years, being the most emotionally healthy person in your friend group, you know, like being able to talk vulnerably about what's going on and being able to
Mm-hmm.
go first and open up is
Right.
actually considered the like thing to achieve, if you will. Like what
Mm,
holy shit, like what a
right.
reorganization of society that would cause.
Right. Right. And it's a totally different kind of, because emotional intelligence has been, talked about, it's not a new concept, but this is a
No.
very different concept or way of articulating emotional intelligence, right? Because a large part of it is turning inward, right? And a lot of emotional intelligence that I've engaged with is more about how you read the crowd, how you
Right.
understand different people and people's different ways of communicating and different stances, and they're different, are they authoritarian, democratic, and it's more about that sort of framework, whereas this is much more subtle and much more intuitive and much more internally focused, which creates a very different and subtle shift in how we communicate and show up for each other.
Mm-hmm. And this brings me back to that permission piece. Okay.
Mm.
So if Tamsin and I, if there's anything communicated today at all that really sticks with you, is that you are allowed to dive into your emotional life.
Mm.
You're allowed. It's
Mm.
cool here
Mm-hmm.
to do that.
Right.
You
Right.
are supported in that. You're not the only one in that.
Yeah.
And to take up space in your emotional navigation and
Mm-hmm.
to really truly navigate that swirl,
Mm-hmm.
when you can come into being able to verbalize your emotions or to articulate the nuances or to be able to anticipate how a certain thing makes you feel, and therefore that's not quite the right choice, and so therefore you can say
Mm-hmm.
no to the thing that's an obligation instead, and then stay home and
Mm-hmm.
connect with yourself. Like the trickle effect of being able to be so willing
Mm-hmm.
to go inside and to resource your yes and resource your no from inside versus
Right.
external pressures.
Right.
We're talking about a certain kind of freedom that
Mm-hmm.
until you know it, you don't know it even exists. But when you know it, and there's no turning back.
And it feels so good. And I think the other thing that I would just want to sort of add on to the end of that is that it can change, and that knowing can change. And I remember realizing that when I was trying to figure out what definition of boundary I liked. And
Ooh.
Brene Brown's definition of boundary is what feels good. And that to me was just fantastic because it articulated this fact that, that knowing, like the boundary of, what you're going to say yes to, what you're going to say no to, absorbing other people's energies, all of those sorts of things that we've been talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can change and evolve as you do this work, as you move through different spaces, as you engage in different communities. And there isn't, like we were saying before, there isn't a one size fits all for each, for all humans, but there also isn't a one size fits all for you, and that you have that space to evolve as you get more subtle with this, as you do more of this work. You can get more into that place of going, yes, I feel okay doing that there or on that day or at this time, but I don't in this place or this day and this time, and that's okay. And I know that. Right?
And that's okay. We're allowed to change our minds.
Like, holy freaking shit, man. Which is huge for women, particularly. Like, I mean, I'm not discounting the male experience, but I think for women, we're much more locked into this,
Can we just all exhale that one? Let that sink in all the way down to the feet. Oh my gosh. Okay. So in that presence, in that grounded place, being able to accept what's coming up might just look like, okay, this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
I am pissed right now.
Mm-hmm.
I am angry for reasons I do not understand, but I am angry, I am upset, or I am grieving, and I don't know what I'm even grieving right now, but that's what's happening, and I accept it. That's just what's happening. I surrender.
Yeah. Right. Totally. Totally.
So from that place then, what are your options? how do
What
you
do we do?
engage? What are
So
the
I mean,
rules of engagement?
right. And I think, for, again, it's know thyself. But I think for a lot of people, they discount what their body's telling them. We've learned again to ignore what the wisdom of our body. And, when you think of it in a basic sort of, anatomical, physiological reaction, for most of us, when we get into this state of anxiety, is picking that as an example right now, which is the sort of the tether thing, right?
Yeah.
Is that we have a huge amount of adrenaline and cortisol in our system, and it's flooding through our system. And we know that the research is really compelling that if you don't let that go, then it sits in your gut. It contributes to weight gain around your midsection. It affects how your body fights viruses, which is key right now. Cortisol is designed to be a virus fighter. And if you are in a state of constant fight flight, your cortisol is just building up in your system and is not going to be reactive and ready to do the work it needs to do. And so a lot of the time we have to go, okay, so I'm in this state, I'm feeling sad, angry. How am I going to let this emotion move through me? And so for, many people, I say, you just got to move. You've just got to release that energy, because when it's all trapped, it's not doing the right thing, right? When the blood leaves the brain and the digestive tract, when you're in a state of fight flight, so that you can fight and run, you make crappy decisions. You don't digest food well. Like, things start falling apart. So you need to get that energy out of you, right? And again, that depends on who you are. For some people, that's a 10-mile run. For somebody else, it's a walk around the block, or it's a couple of down dogs, bicycle ride, tai chi, things that allow the energy to move through your body. Because if it gets stuck, you just create this loop pattern that every time you get into this stress, right?
Yeah, it's like we're accidentally teaching our body
to
hold on to something.
Yeah.
I use this analogy all the time. People have been tracking my Facebook lives recently. They're like, yeah, we've heard you say that. But like, it's true. Like, our bodies are meant to be these vessels of light, vessels of truth, vessels of inspiration,
Right.
just pumping through all, like connection to the divine. But somehow we got misinformed, especially in a culture where like emotions are bad, right? Engaging with them, moving them through, yelling, moving, crying. Like, crying is such an inconvenience. Don't cry.
Yeah.
We end up becoming a suitcase.
Yeah. Right.
And we're just like trekking our emotional baggage around for our entire lives.
Right.
And if we don't give ourselves permission to move it, it manifests in any kind of way in order to get it moved, which usually, I mean, especially in the US, it's heart disease, it's cancer, it's autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
These really big warning signs that had we had the tools along the way to just listen a little closer. And that's why this is so crucial. Like, this whole chasm in time, this moment with this virus, like, this virus is trying to teach us something. And if we go through this whole thing and just go back to the status quo, we are losing a massive opportunity. And God forbid that happens, because Mother Earth has already been screaming so loud, trying to get our attention.
Right. The question is, right, like, are we the virus? Like, I listened to an episode yesterday where, like, that was the question. Are we the virus? And is this a situation for us to go, whoa, like, what are we doing?
I hope so. I hope so. And for those of you listening, like, you are pioneering this, like, your willingness to go all in on your emotional landscape and just let that adventurous spirit out, get curious, snug a little closer. I'm just like, what if I didn't just repel that thing? What if I just hung out 5 seconds longer? Interesting, just like being in that curiosity.
Right. And I think, the thing that's really fascinating now is, because we've got more time on our hands, because we're not commuting, right? Because we've got that space, this is the time to do it. And if you are not used to doing it, taking a moment to meditate, taking a moment to journal, to figure out a way of allowing yourself these self-reflective practices so that you start creating the habit. And that's where the habit piece comes in, right? If you don't allow yourself the space of going, what's going on? Like you just said, that pause, right? doing the grounding things that you and I have talked about, accepting what's going on, it's really hard to take the next step. And that's what part of a habit cycle is, right? We're looking at these 3 stages of the habit, the cue, what's cueing this behavior? And what am I getting out of it, right? And a lot of the time we've forgotten, or we've lost the ability to acknowledge what we're getting out of it, because it's so deeply embedded and we haven't taken the time to slow down and go, what am I getting out of this?
What's a specific example of like the cue and then like what you're getting at, like those 3 when it comes to emotions?
So a cue is something that triggers the action cycle. So, a cue might be a classic emotional one would be a particular person, right? You have a particular reaction to a particular person and it makes you reach for a glass of wine. It makes you reach for Netflix. It makes you reach for a cigarette or drugs. It makes you fuel up with anger. And, so you start noticing like, this is this habit cycle I'm in, right? And then you start to look at what's the reward? What am I getting out of this, right? So that would be an example of that, is you're looking at what is triggering this and what is that loop that I'm going through. And is it serving me, right? Because the thing about habits is that our brains are brilliant. They want to help, they automate, right? To free up time and energy. But the issue here, and we see that with PTSD, that's a classic example, or addiction, that you get into this cycle where that connection is not aware, right? And it's deeply embedded and it's become disordered, and it's heartbreaking, right? And it's something that's really, I think as I see, people getting addicted to their phones and getting addicted to like the numbing out with Netflix and all of these behaviors that we've all done, right?
Yep. And what I like about your perspective too, of like, as we were planning this conversation of like, what are my options? So just also planting a seed and bookmarking. So that habit part that Tamsin just kind of opened up that conversation, we're going to do a whole other talk on Friday in 2 days about systematizing your self-care for your emotional care. Okay. So we're going to actually talk about like, once this wave of time is over and we're back on, on our commutes and we're back with like kids at school and all of that, like how do we take the gems of this time and make time, prioritize ourselves in this way going forward? Okay. So bookmark that Friday, March 27th at 2 p.m. If you want to join us live, we're going to work super hard to make that happen. Another Zoom conversation. It's up to the technology gods. But okay, so coming back to the options, you talk about the options of like, I can either be with my emotion, like contain it, I can choose to release it, or I can choose to move it. Tell us more about that, because that is a cool mental framework to make this very nebulous thing like a conscious choice.
Right. So, the containing it is really looking at, acknowledging it, thinking about the frame around it, and then, sort of diving deeply into it. So I think one of the things that I think is really interesting about emotions is that they are energy. And when we start to dig deep into them and go, what color is that? Where is it located in my body? What flavor is it? And we start to analyze our emotions. That's when we can let them go, right? And, one of the things to notice is, do you get into that habit cycle if you crave that emotion, right? And I think one of the things that I found, working with people over the years is that I do a lot of detox work with people in different spheres. And one of the things that I encourage people in relationships, and particularly long-term relationships, to do is to look at those cycles of repeated arguments, those arguments that you have again and again and again. And I was with my ex-husband for 16 years, so I know what that's like to be in those systems of long repeated arguments that you don't dive into and you don't look at and go, what am I getting out of this? Like, I know if I say this, it's going to piss him off. He knows if he does that, it's going to piss me off, right? So it's like, what am I doing here?
And why do I need that? What am I going after unconsciously?
So looking through those different pieces is really key here. And again, understanding where you are. One of the things that I love about Ayurveda is that there's this idea, not an idea, a core functional teaching in Ayurveda is that you don't block. So whether it's a fart or a burp or tears, anger, like when you restrain, that's when the trouble starts.
Oh my God. How true. I've never thought about it from that perspective before.
Right? So all of it's energy, like literally, whether it's a belch or a fart or a need to cry, like
true.
Let that shit out, girl.
Yeah, I talk with my clients about like we swallow our truth, literally, but it may go out of sight, but it doesn't disappear. It gets tucked away in that left hip crevice up in the hip flexor and then up in your armpit and it goes somewhere.
Right. No, totally. And I mean, what was really interesting to me as I started diving into more of the subtle energy work was the realization of how much damage I'd done to the right side of my body, which is the masculine side of my body, as I had struggled, in an unhappy marriage to take on the masculine energy, and manifest that and embody that and not doing it correctly in a way that felt right. And, breaking limbs, breaking things, surgeries, injury, being like, well, that's interesting.
That dot connects to that dot.
Yeah.
Similarly, my left side of my body is imbalanced structurally.
Your feminine side.
Right? From carrying
your immune side.
It's from a herniated disc at 25. And the only insight that felt like truth for me, because all the doctors were like, we don't know how you did this. And I just wanted desperately, I'm like, I wish it was from like a weightlifting thing or like flipping my mattress by my, I just wanted to like pinpoint it to something. And my spiritual mentor at the time said, the carrying the weight of your family literally broke your back. No 25-year-old should be carrying that much responsibility for the well-being of her family. And I just
right.
I felt so seen. But from that structurally, so this is just like, it's the mind-body connection. So as
which they're not separate.
No. And promise you this, friends, as you dive more into your emotional body, your physical body will start to realign and rearrange. There's been deep emotional, like guttural cries, especially during my breakup last year, where it was followed by a digestive purging. It's like the body just like, okay, we're done with this now. Flush.
Totally.
Right?
Totally. And I'll say that in yoga class too, like, often deep hip opening work, a lot of emotions get trapped in the hips, so I've been teaching yoga for over 12 years and I've found that, somebody will go into a pigeon pose or some deep hip opener, and you can see, as that emotion starts to get unblocked. And then there's that thing of like, people feeling like they shouldn't cry, and I'm like, no, let it out, baby. Let it out.
I heard this phrase a couple of years ago, tears are the ice melting. And I love that. And not blocking, like you said.
Right.
Like really, if you cannot be comfortable with the entire spectrum of your emotional range, it is unfair to expect any other human to be able to be with you if you're not willing to be there yourself.
Yeah, totally. And that's where this like subtle emotional intelligence shift, I think, is coming, right?
Right. But it also, when I talk about going all in, I put on this warrior archetype.
And I can feel it, girlfriend. The Artemis. I have her tattooed on my rib cage.
Of course you do, boss. Of course you do. But I remember a choice point. I remember during the breakup last year, I remember being face down on the carpet, crying tears that went so deep inside of me. I thought they were actually, I'm not being dramatic, I literally thought they were going to kill me. It was just so deep, and it was so, it was, you know what I realized? It was not just my own tears.
Right.
Right? Like, especially, well,
Right.
and I will say, especially, it seems to me that the women, those in female bodies, are leading this wave
Mm-hmm.
of emotional healing on the planet. It's the rise of the feminine. It's been prophesized
Right.
for years,
Yeah.
centuries. And so my choice, face down in that carpet, to feel it all and know that my future children would not have to cry those tears, it made me really brave. But also, from a practical standpoint, my willingness to grieve the fullness of that relationship, all of the gifts it brought me, everything I became, how much I fucking loved it, and I didn't want to let it go, but I had to, you know. But my willingness to put that warrior, emotional warrior archetype on, it was a promise to myself that if I go all in right now with what's coming up, I won't have to manifest the same kind of like rug being pulled out from under me and to unearth all of it again. I did not want to be in that place again. And so I just put my stakes in the ground. I'm like, this is my full-time job.
Yeah.
But like, I'm doing this thing.
Yeah.
And I did. And I'm better for it, for sure.
Right. Because you fully allowed it through.
Yeah.
And I think that's also really key for, you and I doing the work we do in the world, is that if you are not willing to do the work yourself, you can't show up in leadership for others. And because you then can't, you and I, if we don't do that own personal work, we then absorb all the energy of the people we work with. We are not able to distinguish between their shit and our shit, right? And we're not able to reflect healthily back to our clients and our community where they need to do their work and where we need to do our work, right? And where that boundary ends.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I've been saying a lot that the most grounded people right now are going to be the ones to emerge as leaders, new paradigm leaders. And there's a direct correlation between you being able to be solid, and I'm not talking perfect. I'm talking solid. For you to be solid in your commitment to your own self-care and health and wellness and longevity, to be able to go in on your emotional landscape and know that you have your back, right? That puts you so far ahead. I cannot even put words to, in this social landscape. You will be helping people just by your way of being.
Right. And it's interesting. Somebody said that to me when I was giving a talk the other day, that by articulating my experience and being able to voice what I've gone through, that I am then giving them a voice to do it. I'm creating safety for them to do it too. And that for me was a really interesting way of considering the value of the work that I do in the world and the impact it has. Because, one woman came up to me after a talk I gave in October and said, I can't believe you're standing up here and talking after what you've gone through. And I was initially really taken aback. Then I was really struck that I was really glad that she was able to, say that, because she said, I looked at you and thought, you've had it easy. You don't know what it is to struggle, and that, but then she was really struck by the experiences that I've been through and how that had got me to a place where I could say, you can suffer, you can struggle, you can dive to the depths of despair, you can muddle through all of this, you can purge all this, you can detox this, and you can come out with a strong voice, with a strong presence, with a strong recognition that you can serve others, right? From that place of personal experience, from that place of doing the work, from that place of deep desire, as you said earlier, to be the vessel.
And do it in your humanity.
Right.
right?
Right.
We're
In all of
done.
our imperfections.
Oh God, like I am so done with the glossy, filtered, my shit don't stink, like I've got it all together personas up on stages, elevated above everybody else. I want those people, the people that I follow are the ones, right, embracing who they are fully. They inspire me to be more of myself out loud.
Right.
And that's the kind of leadership that is going to create a new world. You know, all of our systems and structures just shut down. There's a reason for that, because they've been in dysfunction for so long that now we get to be the ones to change the internalized systems first. The systems that say you're not allowed to cry, and you're not allowed to grieve, and you're not allowed to be an inconvenience to the people around you. That is all internalized abuse from the outside saying you're not allowed to be all of who you are. So shut it down because it's inconvenient for me.
Right. Yeah. Let that shit go.
Flush. Down the cord, baby. So what's most important right now is, like, we've shared a lot of information. Most of all, trust yourself. Trust the core of who you are. Trust that you will find the other side of these emotional waves coming up. I promise you, there is another side of those waves, and you've got this. And we're not supposed to know how to do this on our own right away. Okay. So what I want to leave plenty of room for in this conversation is ideas for how to ask for support in navigating your emotions. That might look like reaching out to Tamsin and I. It might look like getting yourself an amazing therapist. I have an amazing therapist. I have been able to unearth some incredibly deeply held traumas that, like, I was just ready to let go of. Didn't make it easy though. And I did meet somebody there holding my hand, you know, energetically and walking me through that process, because we're just not supposed to know how to do it on our own.
And as you acknowledge, like, there are different ways. You know, one of the things that's been really healing for me is working with a Reiki master, you know, and I went to him and I said, you know, I've done all this other work. I've done the talk therapy, I've done the journaling, I've done the meditating, but I still get this PTSD reaction in a particular situation, and it's deeply rooted. And he did this incredibly intense Reiki where, you know, my head was flying back and I was hyperventilating, and, you know, so much tears, so much anger. And again, you know, my analytic brain was like, tell me what's going on, please explain this to me. It's just like, allow it to move out of you, and it's not all yours. And I'm going to break the chains that are not yours and release the chains, the connections to you that are loving and stable and positive from the people in your life and your experiences who are holding you. I'm not going to break those chains. And that to me was one of the most powerful, and I've seen him a number of times, experiences was, you know, because I grew up with a father who's a psychoanalyst, you know, so I was like, doing my talking, doing my meditating, doing my journaling. But it got to this point, I was like, there's something else there.
Right?
So yes, the tools. It's so important to acknowledge that there are multiple tools out there. And again, there's no one size fits all model.
No. Trust your intuition of what you feel called to, because that's going to be your body talking to you of like, okay, that comes next. And then you assimilate that, integrate that. Please leave room for integration. This is the thing. It's like people jump from one healing modality to the next. Like, please leave room to take it in. What else is the point? Let it settle. Find out who you are on the other side of that release.
Absolutely.
You know? That's a huge part of it. And, you know, I'm glad you mentioned Reiki too, because I also have benefited from the energy work perspective, so much so that I got initiated into a Hawaiian lineage of mystic arts called Huna. And I just recently had somebody, she's like, I've done this, I've done that, I've worked with that person, I've done that seminar, I've done that thing. And she is just like been full on her healing journey. And she just kind of needed to bring out the big guns energetically. And so she hired me to do like a deep clearing for using those Hawaiian processes. So like, again, like it was I put the invite out of like, if this feels like a fit, like just know that this option is here, and she reached out.
Right.
So if you also, you know, if you're a body worker, if you're, you know, work in nature, if you're a coach or a healer of some kind, now is the time to make those, like, put the radar out, like be the lighthouse, light the light, and let people know that you also have an option to help them as well.
Yeah.
Because I promise you this, we're going to be seeing more people waking up to wanting emotional wellness and needing help. So if you are one of those people, please don't be shy. Please don't keep it to yourself. In the words of a spiritual teacher from a couple of years ago, like, don't hoard the light. Be available to help people, but also keep in alignment with yourself to know that you are also doing your work in order to help other people do theirs.
Absolutely. So key. Oh, this is such a good conversation. We could talk all day.
We definitely could. And part 2 is coming. So join us on Friday. We're scheduled for 2 p.m. We're going to be talking about how to streamline these tools in your own unique way so that you can create some sort of system, repeatable system, easy to interact with system to continue this care going forward. So I hope you'll join us for that conversation as well. Thank you, Tamsin.
This was so much fun, Krystal.
More to come, darling. Bye, everybody.
Bye.